Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Wow, it is a bright day today. We're gonna go. Sometimes riding in the morning is just so nice. Like, it's a fall morning this morning. It's probably like 65 degrees. And it is just the best way to start my day, I think. Nothing better. If you've been a motorcyclist for any amount of time, you've probably heard people use the phrase wind therapy. They might say, I'm going out for some wind therapy, going out for some throttle therapy. A lot of motorcyclists talk about riding as if it's a therapeutic thing to do. And even people who drive convertibles and people who boat, and especially sailing, I think I hear this more from sailors than maybe from like like power boats, like ski boats, but they all occasionally talk about this concept of wind therapy. And so I was interested in, is there actually anything behind the concept scientifically to say that it's actually good for you? Because we hear so many people talk about how bad motorcycling can be. Like, as soon as you say you ride a motorcycle, everyone's first comment is like, oh, I know someone that got injured on one, or whatever, right? And it's not always something fun to share about yourself, that you like to ride, basically, because there are tons of negative people around the concept of riding. So I was interested, is there anything behind this concept that actually could prove to be useful for people? Is there any science to suggest that it's good for you? Right, because the wind therapy almost has a clinical kind of sound to it, right? Like, oh, you were prescribed therapy, or oh, you had some kind of thing. So in this, I do not mean to make light of anyone that needs help. Go get the help you need. Okay, YouTube. But you've probably heard the concept of, you never see a motorcyclist parked outside of a psychiatrist's office. And that's another kind of thing along with wind therapy. There is a psychiatrist's office right there. And we are riding past it. Lots of must not break down. That'd be a bad spot to break down. Yeah, so I just want to take you through 3 different ways I thought about this. So I thought about this from my kind of narrow perspective of like, well, what am I doing when I ride a motorcycle that's good for me? And then I talked to my dad, who also rides motorcycles, to get his perspective on it. And then I was curious for the comments on this video to hear maybe how it's beneficial to you in maybe an entirely different way that I hadn't thought of. Because that's the thing about a lot of these experiences, right? It can be pretty unique to you and what you get out of it, and it can even be different based on the bike you ride, maybe where you ride. And so I'm curious for a lot of your input on this video too. And then I was going to talk about the very small amount of like kind of scientific, if you want to call it, like research I found to suggest any real benefit. I love this little R3. So anyway, for myself first, when I thought about this concept, I was thinking about like, well, what do I do when I'm riding a motorcycle that's nice for me? And I thought, well, when you ride a motorcycle, you're totally dialed in to the fact that you're riding. And so you're totally focused on a single task. You're not multitasking, right? What's the difference between a motorcycle and a car? Well, in a car, you know, you might be dealing with like a screaming kid in the back. I see people all the time with like Netflix or watching TV, like streaming up on their dash. You know, they're eating food, they're drinking, they're spilling. they're messing with the GPS and the infotainment system. When you are driving a car, you're not 100% committed to driving a car, right? You are very distracted by other things, whereas on a motorcycle you're totally dialed in. And so I did a little bit of research around this to see if multitasking versus single tasking, they call it, so being focused on just one thing at a time, had any benefits. And there were huge benefits to it. So I mean, a lot of psychiatrists talk about single tasking as being like a good thing to practice mentally every day, where you're just totally focused on one thing. They talk about how at work and in personal lives, people tend to be distracted by tons of different things. No one actually accomplishes, I think it was like 5% of people actually accomplish the goals they set out to in a day, right? Because they're so distracted. Multitasking decreases your productivity, it increases your stress, it makes you less efficient, right? All these bad things about it, whereas single tasking gives you so much more time for strategic, like insightful thought. You have increased sense of satisfaction, increased productivity, and I thought, well, that's exactly what a lot of us are experiencing on motorcycles. That sense of like confidence and just drive, where it's like the controls of a motorcycle become intuitive, right? You have just one control pretty much for every part of your body, except for, you know, your right hand. You got the throttle and the brake, but it's very simple. And so that's probably why a lot of motorcyclists, and including myself, feel so confident on a bike, where we're not really afraid of weaving back and forth between some traffic and working our way through. Because to me, it's like I'd rather just keep flowing and moving through traffic rather than slowing down and potentially getting hit, right? So that was kind of my first thought about riding a motorcycle and some of the differences you experience, right? That kind of single tasking, that being totally dialed in on and focused on one thing at a time, has some really good benefits. When I stopped, I realized I totally forgot to talk about this one aspect I want to talk about during this video, and it goes back to multitasking. So when I read a little bit about multitasking, I thought it was interesting, because they, like researchers, people like that, say you can't actually truly multitask. They basically say that what happens is, like, your brain goes through this process of rule activation, and so you have one rule for the set of things you're doing, and then a new rule for the new set of things you're trying to multitask and change to. So, like, for instance, you're writing an email, and there's a whole set of rules surrounding how to compose an email, like grammar, right, whatever, being polite, whatever you're responding about. And then someone comes up and asks you to, like, review an engineering drawing or something else, like totally different task, right? Or plan a party or whatever it is. And so your brain switches the rules from, like, grammar and, like, you know, whatever that task was, to, like, okay, well, analytical and you know, maybe engineering oriented or accounting oriented, whatever it is you're doing, right? So I thought that was interesting, where it's like the researchers say you can't really multitask, and so that's, you know, all of a sudden why riding a motorcycle and focusing on one single thing really feels good, because you're not constantly jumping back and forth, switching mental gears, right, between tasks. But the other thing that I thought was interesting was the only piece of research that suggests that multitasking can be good for you is from a researcher at Meta. So that, like, Facebook company that does Oculus and that stuff, where they're trying to slap VR or AR, like virtual reality, augmented reality goggles on you all the time. They were the only people to suggest that multitasking could be good for you, which I find hilarious, because these are the kind of people who just want you to constantly be immersed in their own little computerized world, and where your attention is monetized, right? Everyone's vying for your attention now because it's monetized through ad revenue, which is ridiculous. And so these people, they just want you to think multitasking is good for you, and living in an augmented reality world or a virtual reality world because then they can split your time and charge more money for it, because you can be paying attention to multiple ads at the same time, or multiple things at the same time. To me, it's so silly. It's like, this seems so obvious that you have an obvious conflict of interest in saying that multitasking is good for you, when literally every other researcher says it is definitely not good for you. So anyway, that's the last bit of this that I going back now. We'll probably rewind back to past me. Now, when I talked to my dad, I asked him the same question. I was like, what does wind therapy mean to you? Because he uses this term quite a bit. He was probably the first time I ever heard it. And to him, he was talking about, well, it's not at all single tasking. He actually thinks that riding a motorcycle is a little bit like mentally exhausting, because you have to steer and clutch and everything. So for me, it feels very intuitive. For him, he feels like it's a little bit more work. But for him, he said wind therapy to him is really much more about recreation and being outside, enjoying the weather, the wind, the sun. And so I was thinking about that, and it's like, well, you know, there are big health benefits to just being out in the sun, because vitamin D production is activated by the sun, you know, cardiovascular health, all sorts of different things, where it's like, well, there's actually a, you know, health benefit to being outside, and you might not get as much vitamin D and satisfaction of being outside if you're really in a car, you know, behind like tinted glass or something, rather than being on a motorcycle. So that was kind of interesting to me, that for him it was so much so different, right? It was kind of like, this is an athletic activity, this is a sport, this is, you know, something a lot more like that. And then just being in the wind is like, you know, when you're at the beach and it's a windy day, how satisfying and relaxing that can be. Maybe we can come up with something where it's actually like, you know, reasonably like good for you to be riding a motorcycle, and remove some of the negative stigma. Because I mean, honestly, when I ride, it's the highlight of my day. It's the best thing I do all day. So anyway, cop ahead, you see? He gave me the sign. Look at that. What a bro. Where is the cop? So the next aspect of wind therapy I want to talk about, there's actually a therapy called cupping therapy that sometimes they call wind therapy, that like these places that do acupuncture and stuff like that will do. And it dates back to like ancient times, like ancient civilizations were doing this kind of cupping therapy. And so basically the way it works is, you have like these suction cups that were like glass cups or something like that. You light a flame in them, maybe they create like an air of low pressure, and then it kind of like softly sucks against your skin and like on your back or something. It's supposed to relieve tension and stress and stuff like that. And so there's not a lot of science behind that to prove why it works, but it's just documented that like it kind of can work. And I've never done it, I don't know. So, you know, this isn't me endorsing that and saying go get some cupping therapy or whatever that, I mean, it sounds kind of weird to me. So the concept of the cupping therapy and the wind therapy, though, is creating spots of low pressure on your body. And that is what you're doing with riding a motorcycle, because you have an area of high pressure wind hitting you, and then like against your back there'll be an area of low pressure. I mean, you can go look up like computational fluid dynamics models of like a person riding a motorcycle and stuff like that, and see what I'm talking about. But you do have like an area of low pressure generated against your body, so maybe that has some kind of effect on it too. I don't know. That was, I mean, there's very little on the internet and research about this, but anyway, I wanted to create this video so maybe we can find out some more and figure out some more ways that helps people. But anyway, to kind of conclude and wrap up this video, my thoughts on this were really mixed, because I come from the generation they sometimes jokingly call like Generation RX, right? Like Generation Prescription, the medicated generation, where you know, we grew up on like Ritalin or Adderall or all this stuff, right? And we've just been diagnosed with things our whole life and only getting by from that. And my generation is so experience heavy based, right? Like, we don't own homes, we don't even own our cars, everything's a loan, everything's a payment, everything's a subscription service. everything's so easy, right? We just grew up with the internet. And so I thought it was very interesting where we're so experience driven, yet when we come to transportation, we just want to hop on an airplane and go. We just want to hop in a full self-driving like Tesla or car. We don't really want to like have the experience of driving for a lot of people. I would say it's very much a minority thing for those of us who do enjoy it. And so I just thought it was interesting that a generation that so heavily values experience that we would neglect the experience of riding and travel, and how satisfying it can be, how therapeutic it can potentially be. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the subject. Go ahead and leave yours in the comments below, and look forward to having some conversation about this, learning more about what it means to you. Thanks, and we'll catch you on the next video.